at the last meeting. And I want to also start with some apologies for the October 9th meeting. We were unexpectedly canceled, and we do have our tech team working with us and making sure that we have rights in this platform. It's a little more complicated than we would like to admit, but we didn't have the rights to start the meeting, so that is why that meeting was abruptly canceled, and we couldn't get in ourselves, but we were able hopefully to get to the participants who had registered. So I'll recap the October and the end of September and the first meeting in October, as well as our meeting yesterday. So this platform, you will not be able to unmute yourself, but you will be able to put questions in the chat, and we will get to those after the very small slides. And it's just 3 of them. Again, it's just because it's just a recap, and hopefully I can answer any of your questions related to the work we've been doing. So let me share my screen really quick, and then we'll come off right after I share and get right to any questions you guys have. All right. Okay, so in October, we really met the last week in September as well in October. And those 2 meetings were really to try to understand how we do program placement in the district. So what SAP is looking at is not necessarily which programs we should be doing in DeKalb or which programs stay online or offline or evaluation, because that is a much larger scope. Though that is something that has come out of our meetings, that is a need. Which we totally agree with. There is going to be a separate internal committee with a few SAP members that is going to kind of look at onboarding, sunsetting, and evaluating of all school choice programs. We are hoping that we will bring that recommendation forward at the end of the school year with a possible implementation next year. A lot of that is still up in the air. The committee is just being formed as of like this week. And so still kind of up in the air on like the actual programs that we will want to do in DeKalb, as well as that evaluation. With that said, that means we are making assumptions with our recommendations that we are continuing each program that we currently have in the district. Now, where those programs are placed is kind of where SAP comes in. So we looked at over the course of 2 meetings, as well as a lot of work last year on program placement. Overwhelmingly, the committees believe that programs should be placed inside of neighborhood schools versus standalone programs. So that was meeting in the end of September. And then we came back again and said, are there special criteria that would warrant a program being placed outside of a building? If that's our overarching rule, great. But there is always kind of some odds and ends and things that we should consider, even if there is a standardized rule. And so we came back in the beginning of October, and SAP determined that special criteria for programs for being outside of a building may include specialized student need programs. It may include specialized instruction expertise. And that I want to pause on, because there are certain educator certifications that are aligned to special programs that we may not be able to do across the district, just based on the sheer number of specialized teachers that are in that space, or specialized teachers that have those certifications. So something to think about there. And then the third kind of unique space is maybe non-traditional grade configuration. So if we have the 4-8 schools like Kittredge or Wadsworth, or we have a Montessori program that does multiple grade bands in a classroom, or you have a K-8 structure that doesn't necessarily fit our current K-5, 6A, 9, 12, those may be considerations to be outside of buildings. So that happened, again, end of September and early October. And then yesterday, and I don't have all of the data yet that is ready to share, but yesterday we then said, all right, so we've kind of figured out our push to around recommendations for programs, but what about boundaries, attendance boundaries that are for our schools? So not necessarily boundary lines. SAP committee members are not drawing boundary lines. There is an entire consultant team, as well as our planning and operations team. They will do that work. We are essentially giving the input to put in their process in the system that draws out the lines on how to do so. And so we charge staff with thinking about the criteria around what makes an attendance boundary school, types of buildings and grade bands, and a bunch of different criteria. So our committee kind of got an overview on what that was, what we were expecting from them, and when they broke out into their teams, there was a individualized survey that everyone did. They kind of talked as a committee or as a team, excuse me, but everyone did an individualized survey. They looked at criteria for reviewing attendance boundaries based on how other schools and comparable to DeKalb does it, as well as generalized criteria that came out of that research for those different schools. We then asked them to kind of rank different amenities, for school sites based on grade bands. So, should a school site have for kindergarten? What K-5? What should a school site have for middle school? What should it have for high school? Things of that nature. So that included athletic field space, bus turnarounds, teacher or staff parking, and in high school case student parking, things of that nature. And so they ranked those, and then we did ask them to determine if there should be a minimum school capacity size. Our elementary, middle, and high schools, as far as how many seats and capacity they have, is very extremely variant in our district. That just comes from how or where those schools are built. So if we have some guidance on is a school too small or too large, we were kind of looking for that. Then the importance of balanced regions and cohesive program offerings that has come up a lot in our committee over the year, and importance of the possibilities related to grade configuration, like how important is grade configuration? Should every area have the same grade configurations and the same program offerings, and how important is that balance? We heard a lot in SAP about balancing of educational and academic programs. So just asking those questions around that as we kind of reimagine our boundaries. And then we talked a little bit about, or just honestly one question about kind of that transition plan. Is this a rip the Band-Aid off kind of situation, or, obviously a phased approach? So we asked about that. And then we asked about just some input on the disparities of athletic facilities. There is again, not necessarily a SAP, but a separate group looking at all of our kind of athletic fields at our high schools and middle schools, as well as the stadiums. Just wanted to make sure we get some SAP input on that. So that's kind of a recap. The information from today's meeting is going to be online. We are editing our website a little bit because our team put some stuff in some wonky places. And so that video should be up by tomorrow, hopefully. And then we will follow that up on our resource tab with the committee's survey information, as well as obviously send it to our committee members, because the next time we meet, we'll be looking at some scenarios. So the scenarios, again, will not have boundary lines in particular, but they will say, if based on this input around programs and based on this input around your attendance school kind of criteria, here are several options that we could start looking at. And then the committee will kind of, if you will, a la carte through those options, say, and option A, this really looks good, but we really don't like this. But in option B, this really looks good, and we really don't like this. So we can kind of mix and match kind of the things that make sense, that also, again, are related to our guiding principles, and then create yet another slew of options. So that's the reason why this part of the meeting this fall was really important. Again, they're kind of giving the planning and HBM team inputs to put into the system that they're going to use to create the scenarios that we will start looking at. And those scenarios obviously will be public for public consumption, for feedback from our community as well. So yeah, that is what we've been doing. So I will stop there. I'm probably going to have our website up in a minute too, to just show you guys where you can give our feedback and how to navigate it. So let me do that really quick, and then we'll open it up to your questions.
Alrighty, I will start reading off some of those questions while you pull up that thing. Oh, go ahead.
Yep,
Actually, I'll wait.
sorry. So actually, let me help you guys get to it from the start page. So our website has changed for those that have been following our work. Website's changed a little bit. It's kind of divided up by division, but because we're so special, we have a little landing page right on the front right after the video. And so you'll see this is just kind of our intro video, and most of the SAP information will be here. This is the video I was talking about. It's out of place. It will move soon, but you'll see a SAP at a glance. It's just a quick shot of like what we did over the past month. So similar to what I've just shared with you guys, there will be a video around that we will post online. You guys probably came to this tab under engagement opportunities to get to tonight's meeting under community meeting. So anything we do for the community will be posted here. And then if you want to give us some feedback, I believe it's under engagement opportunities. Oh, sorry, community feedback tab. And I'm going to leave that up because I love, we do this because I think we need just different ways of connecting, but any feedback that you want to get to the SAP committee or to be included in the feedback that we share with the committee or board will have to come through this site. So you can obviously, I'll have Kayla put it in the chat as well. And tonight, I'm happy to talk with you guys, but the information tonight is that it's conversation. Anything you want to get to our committee must go through that website, that survey, I should say. All right, ready for questions.
Before we hop into questions, can you just address, I guess, the big elephant in the room moving forward? What does SAP look like given in light of recent events of the district?
Sure. Yeah. So if you saw from our board chair, there are several changes that are obviously and inevitably going to happen given the change in leadership. They are committed to SAP and committed to continuing the work. Dr. Sauce has said it. He said it at our SAP meeting last night, so you'll hear him on video if you care to watch that. So we are moving along. I will say that this is a big project, and usually, there's a huge superintendent backing behind this kind of project. But I believe the board is just as equally as supportive of it. So from what I have been told, we are going to continue this work. Dr. Sauce has been closely connected to the work that I've been doing as well. And he is quite supportive of it. So as long as he is in this space and the board is supportive, we're going to continue work as usual.
Alrighty, and on to our first question. Please address timing again. If we have a child in a special program school, is there a chance that that program may not exist next year? If yes, if families are currently happy with the program that their child is in, how can you not give them ample time to explore other opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So nothing from SAP can be implemented by next fall. So again, we're saying that program placement is what we're looking at. We wouldn't shift a program next fall. So we will talk about what the program placement may look like in a full timeline. So by May, when we deliver our full student assignment project to the board, there will be some timelining associated with that. And a lot of that has to do with possibly if a building is shifting, moving, opening, or closing, if it's being renovated. So a lot of those I don't have specifics on yet, but it's not going to change by next fall.
Okay, next question. Can you explain what data is being reviewed during these discussions? It has been relayed to parents from our PAC meetings that the data that has been given is missing or incomplete and incorrect. We were told that this is both for the programs and boundaries, and that this missing or incomplete data is what HPM dashboard is based on. How accurate is that dashboard?
That's a great question. So I want to also frame that I am a facilitator of the meeting and conversation. I get data from the sources that we have available, which is our planning team. I have pushed pretty hard for my SAP members to that actually really understand this district much better than I do, as well as data. When they find an error or if there is something missing, I push it to them pretty quickly. On some of those levers, we've been able to get some edits, and there is, in full transparency, some data that just doesn't exist, like for programs. So when we originally thought we could look at actual programs and program offerings, that data isn't widely available in the district. It is for some programs because they have accreditations and things like that, but it isn't for most, which is why we can't give recommendations on that. There is some data that our district has in some school for some schools and not others, for instance. So the HPM data that's around programming. As far as boundaries, schools, and enrollment and projections and things like that, I have to lean on what our program, or excuse me, our planning and operations teams have. I have been told that that data is vetted. It is true that whatever is on that HPM dashboard outside of the, I believe, facility adequacy scores and assessment scores are based on the information that we do input from planning. That's the best I have. I think if there is challenging data around that, that is something we need to consider. However, overall, irrespective of that data, we have 20,000 open seats in this district. So there is a need to look at this work, even if the capacity, if you will, may not be exact at one school or another. We do know that there are a lot of open seats, and there are some large inefficiencies for that we do have to address. But I don't discredit that there is some holes in some of the data areas that have brought some concern. And for those areas like programming, we've shifted on what it is we're looking at, so we aren't making as an ill-informed decision.
Awesome. Okay, next question. When the gifted programs are already being watered down at our schools, why is a consideration to do away with the specialized programs such as Kittredge, rated one of the best schools in the state?
So that is misinformation. If you saw the slide, it said that the SAP program is pushing for as many of our programs to be in schools as possible. However, there were special considerations. And different grade bands is one. I will speak holistically from what I continue to hear from SAP is there is a kind of push and pull at neighborhood schools versus magnet schools, where a lot of our neighborhood school families, as well as some people that work in those spaces, and not necessarily your principals. We have all, teachers and coordinators and support staff on our committee as well. Kind of feel like a lot of the support and talent gets pulled out of those spaces and then put into specialized program areas. So I think a lot of that push and pull we kind of heard in the SAP committee. And there is a strong pull from that committee that investing in the neighborhood schools invest into that community. And I think that's where kind of the overarching piece around we would like to see neighborhood programs in neighborhood schools came from. Again, there are always caveats, which is where those specialized considerations came from.
If specialty programs are only offered in neighborhood schools, will those specialty programs only be available to children that are within the assigned geographic boundaries? If it is available to all, will DeKalb provide transportation across the county to each of the schools?
Great question. So, kind of one of the pieces that came along with if neighborhood schools had programs in them, there is a push to make sure that there's some kind of replication in either a super cluster or a region format. So if there is a specialized magnet program in one, there should be that. If it's only in North, there should be one in Central, and there should be one in South. So I think that kind of alleviates the transportation across the district. We would still have to do some kind of transportation maybe within the region, but that is way more cost efficient than trying to do it across lines. Very, very good question. And there's a bunch of different scenarios that we will have to look at on how to do that. And there will be a bunch of different ways of looking at that.
What about students who have already put in multiple years, 5 or 6, in a program? Will they be allowed to continue on their education and social path that they've built?
Yeah, so again, the committee is not looking at changing the types or numbers of programs. That is not a purpose of SAP. Thank you. Not a purpose of the committee. So if a program moves, then those students would more than likely move with that program. It's really just about program placement at this point. Our policy also kind of indicates that if a student is in its last year of a program and or school, more than likely they get to stay. So there's some policy things that kind of protect families who have been in it for a while, along with things like hardship. So we would obviously, work with families to make sure that there's a smooth transition, or if a family wants to stay in one place versus another, there's some built-in procedures for that as well.
And going on that, when will actual dates be communicated in terms of when implementation will take place, since this could impact our children and our communities in such a significant way?
Great question. So I think I said at the top of the hour that we will, again, kind of talk about preliminary stuff in January. We will shop this with community to get as much feedback as we possibly can between January and the end of March, April, end of April, maybe even through the first kind of few weeks in May. And then there will be a full timeline and the plan delivered to the board in May. So once that timeline is more than likely going to take an entire school year for us to talk about what that implementation looks like if people are moving for the following school year. So again, SAP doesn't have intentions of doing anything next fall.
How does combining schools help with the number of failing schools in DeKalb, known as Georgia Promise Schools?
Yeah, we student assignment is not looking at school like scores or anything like that. That is a non-factor for us. We are simply looking at the buildings and the seats that we have available and density of where families live or don't live, things of that nature. We do not have school scores or anything like that as a part of our process.
How does East Floss impact the moving up of SAP?
Great question. So I believe East Block 7 has to get voted on next November, which kind of pushed our timeline up a little bit. We wanted originally preliminary recommendations to happen in March, but once I was at least told, and forgive me if I'm butchering this, I don't have all the lingo around East Block, still a little bit new to me, but the districts that have to kind of band together for that funding and for that vote moved their timeline up, which means we moved our timeline up so we could have a general idea of like physical building and building needs throughout the district, that we have to shift or put on an East Block list in order to get the vote. So that's why January was critical, to just start getting an idea, at least on what it is, direction we could possibly go, and then have the community give us that feedback. So by the summer, our contractors and planning can really have a full East Block list that they could begin processing with the board.
Can you touch on a little bit on how the SAP committee was organized and how the members were selected to be a part of the SAP committee?
Yeah, so last year and a half ago, we put out a call to action for SAP. It was open to really anybody who received it. We pushed it out through our typical communication channels in the district. We used our family engagement specialist to push it out to kind of some unconventional channels. We asked churches, we put it in the Decatur-ish, kind of put it wherever. Anyone that applied, we had a metric based on the goals of SAP that we used, and then our staff across several departments received all of the applicants without any identifying information. They rated their answers against the metrics, and then people were selected to be on the committee. After this school year, we pushed it out again for people that were really engaged, and asked for more members. As you know, and with anything natural attrition, we had about 30 to 35 members not really participate or show up. So we decided to replace those over the summer. And then over the summer, I pretty much onboarded them each month on the different phases that we went through over the fall, onboarded them onto where our documents and our website information was, and then those families and members started in this fall with us.
And can you touch on how HPM became involved in the SAP process?
Yes, so I the we HPM is really here to help one support kind of the boundary piece of this, but also to understand what the building needs are related to East Blast funding. So they will be managing the East Blast funding and spending. So because of that, it was important for them to be a part of the SAP work to understand kind of the trajectory of how the planning is going to come into actuality, and then to use that information to inform how East Blast funding is spent.
Instead of closing specialty standalone schools, have there been any considerations to adding other schools in the county that fit a similar model to Kittredge, considering its long-standing success and top state rankings?
Yeah, so again, we're not recommending closing anything at the moment. We are recommending program schools being embedded in neighborhood schools, or having certain variations of that throughout the district that have specialty models included in it. So I know that there has been a lot of talk about they're trying to close. That is untrue. We are suggesting, at least at the moment, that as many of those programs be in schools as possible, yet there could be variations based on specialized criteria. So let me keep that on the screen, because I feel like that has been a lot of misinformation around that in particular. So yes, there's a lot of different models that have come up that the committee has looked at. The Hanover Research Group also did a study on program models across the district. We also connected with Magnet Schools of America around models. So yes, there's lots that we could do, but again, this committee is not going to be in charge of changing programs. There just isn't enough information documented at the moment outside of test scores, and that is one kind of one pillar of a program success. That is not the only, right? And so we want to be able to make sure that we have a little more informed knowledge on how our programs are doing across the district before we make recommendations or any suggestions on shifting or changing those.
DeKalb continues to move small groups of people around claiming to fill seats, but it just disrupts the community and never solves the actual enrollment issues. The example in 2019, DeKalb tried to move our street 25 kids, only three public school children. Okay. Can we not just invest in the schools and buildings rather than try to send children to a farther school away from community to quote, fill all the empty seats, end quote?
No, great. Agreed. I don't think that there is a one size fits all solution to this, which is why this work is so complex, and very much so a domino effect. If you do X, that might impact Y. So we have developed the metrics. In most spaces, when this work starts, the first thing they look at is capacity and the density of students and where they live. One thing that's a little challenging with that is that density of where people live shifts often, especially every 10 or so years, like that shifts, but that's the building is fixed, right? And so that's where those get a little wonky when you're looking at density and where families actually live and versus the capacity and where the physical building is. So it is both and I think the metric really helps us determine, and along with our guiding principles, even if the building I don't know, makes sense, if it's not in the right location, it could be that the building that's in the right location needs way more support or repairs in order to get it up to the standard that we needed so we could serve the most kids. We're looking at proximity to either both other schools, but also to where proximity of where kids live in distance to the schools. So there's a lot of different, just a lot of different ways of looking at it. So we are not looking at one way or one size fits all.
What about all of the quote COVID babies end quote that were placed on long wait lists for pre-K?
I don't have a lot of information about pre-K necessarily. We know that there is a wait list. We know that the need is greater than what we can offer. The pre-K, from my understanding, pre-K 4 is at all of our buildings, and then there is an early learning center. But funding wise, I'm not sure that the district has pushed on how to fund pre-K 3, at least in every building. So I'm not, I'll have to kind of get with the pre-K team on where that is. They are a part of that program committee that we're forming just to understand the funding piece and how that works, because unlike K-12, the pre-K piece is not fully funded from, at least from the state or federally funded, as from my understanding. So there's something with the funding piece with pre-K that I don't personally fully understand. But I know that there's a need there. There's a desire. The question I think is can we match that with funding?
What happened to all the facility studies that were done in the last time DeKalb was trying to go through a process like this in around 2018? Question mark. And has that been taken into consideration during this current process?
Absolutely. So the CMP is kind of how, well, not kind of, the CMP is how Dresden is being fixed, how Cross Keys kind of got on the board to get fixed. It is how things that were how Sequoia Middle High School is being built to alleviate some of the overcrowding in other areas, high school and middle school areas in the north. So that information actually came from the CMP. I'm not sure that everything was is being done from the CMP, because there was definitely some question around it, around how much community input, for instance, was a part of that. There were some easy kind of low hanging fruit where the need was pretty obvious, and I think that's what planning started with. And I think we've definitely looked at. I've read it at least. I've definitely have it as a resource for our committee to look at. But there, from my understanding, was some mistrust around that report, which is maybe why not every piece of it actually got implemented.
Where can parents locate a list of the options being voted on by the board in January, such as redistricting lines, revisit of programs, etc.? There are a lot of rumors, mumbling of ideas that may or may not be options, and I feel like it would be fair for parents to know what is being considered and if it will or will not involve their students. Example, when you mention a program embedded into a neighborhood school, how would that work?
Yeah, so the how is not SAP. SAP is just the what. The how is internal people inside of the district who would be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the how. I've said that a lot. I encourage people to go to our website. We have nothing to hide. We post every single document from our committee. We post every single meeting summary, as well as videos on here. There is a lot of information based on hearing a one line from either a committee member or one line from a video that, again, is just untrue. I think it is important to listen to our recap videos. Our meetings are long, they're 2 hours. It is silly for me to believe someone's going to watch a 2 hour video every other week, which is why we do the 1 minute kind of recaps in the beginning and those are on the overview page, because I think it's just important to hear it from the horse's mouth. So these like little recap videos tells you exactly what we mean, what we've been talking about. The October one is pretty much going to be pretty similar to what I'm saying here on this slide. Here's kind of what the recap is, about the information that we talked about in our committee. So that's important. So again, even if SAP says like we believe that neighborhood schools should be inside of program buildings, they may talk about the where, like how the process on how that works, how things move, when it happens. That's all DeKalb. That is not SAP. Our SAP committee's expertise is across the board, and there are a lot of nuances to it, like educator resources and certifications and how it works with HR. Like there's just a lot more to it than just move the program. So though this may be a great idea, which is why we shop it as we shop it with the community in spring. My role will also to be, or has already started to be, to shop the ideas with the internal team to see if it's even plausible. So it's still, again, really fluffy right now, which is why I think, these kind of meetings are important to just have some clarity.
How is embedding special programs like Kittredge into local schools different than closing Kittredge so that it can be embedded into a separate local school? You keep saying it's misinformation, but you don't explain the difference.
I'm sorry, say that again because I don't know that I understand the question.
How is embedding special programs like Kittredge into local schools different than closing Kittredge so that it can be embedded into a separate local school?
Into a separate local school. I, I'll try to answer this as best as I can. So, closing a program means the program does not exist anymore. That is not what SAP is recommending. SAP is saying that we have too many buildings and not enough students, and resources should be as close to where people live and in their and in the schools that they serve as possible. So, Kittredge is an example. It is not the example. There is also theme schools that are being talked about, our Montessori programs, Arabia Mountain. Those are all programs outside of schools right now. And the cost to run some of those programs, and Kittredge is an anomaly in this regard, when they are not full, is very, very costly. And so there's been some question about, does that model make sense? So that is kind of where that came from. And again, I point to non-traditional configurations is a consideration on why something should be outside of a building. Kittredge and Wadsworth Montessori programs are, and DSA are, or DAA, excuse me, are non-traditional grade band configurations. So there is a possibility that we're going to see a model where they are still outside of a building, but there is going to be a model where they are also in a building. We will show both. We will talk about the pros and cons of both of those models.
What is the estimated time frame of changes being implemented once decisions have been made?
So what I heard, at least from our planning team, is you're talking about a 3 to 5 year trackway, especially if construction is needed. So if we develop some kind of timeline, like that phase one timeline within, the following school year, maybe for things that can shift without construction needs, maybe, or where entire, programs can move, things like that. The next phase may be like minimal construction, or you just have to do an addition or something of that nature. And then phase three might be like a full build of a school building or things like that. So yeah, it's like a 3 to 5 year probably timeline after that we may be presenting in May.
And once again, what actual changes are expected to take place in the fall? If you could just one more time let us know.
So I'm gonna say it again. SAP is not recommending anything to change for fall 2027. 6. What is this? 26.
Yeah. What would you say to a parent who is worried about their child being moved from a strong performing school or cluster to a low performing school or cluster? You said school quality or scores is not being considered in the SAP process, but it is a huge issue for those impacted.
That's a great question, and I don't disagree with that statement. So whatever the shift is going to be, again, this is why that spring feedback session is so important. If that is, obviously a challenge for a family, I think that then goes to our CNI and our schools team, so they can kind of talk through that. Again, we're just kind of giving the idea that how that will happen will then get pushed not just from the community lens, but also to our CNI and schools teams to talk about what that looks like and how that would be actually impactful. And I think that's a real concern, and I don't discredit that. It's just not something that our team could dig into. I think you have to have a little more of a education background to push on that a bit. So I feel like our team our committee, excuse me, is pretty vast in their knowledge, and I just didn't want to leave that to communities only to make that decision.
Has any consideration been given to the fact that people make housing choices based on school zones and the financial impact this will have on the residents by way for decreasing property values if redistricted to a less desirable school?
We have definitely heard it from the community. I've definitely shared that with the board and the committee. Yeah, I mean, we have. I mean, there's only so much on that end, especially when we have 20,000 open seats that we can do. So, are we looking at it? Absolutely, at least for on the operations end. We have enlisted Decide DeKalb to come to our meetings, especially as we start with the scenario building, to just give us some recommendations on economic development spaces. Like, what is this looking like? Is there a space that we need to consider not because there is economic development happening? Things of that nature. So, yes, it's a consideration. It's not necessarily, I would say, something on the forefront for SAP. It's more about, again, the building the boundaries of programs. And then again, as things arise in the community meetings, that's something we could bring to the board, and maybe some expertise that or people that have expertise in that area to shift and push us on.
Okay, last couple questions here. So, to conclude, the decision on the possibility of closing Kittredge. If the SAP committee votes to move forward for the Board of Education to vote on the scenario of embedding the magnet program in neighborhood schools, and the Board of Education does vote to move this scenario forward, does that translate to Kittredge being closed?
It will have multiple scenarios. I cannot confirm or deny that what the board is going to do with a scenario. We will show them multiple scenarios.
And with that, they were another question that was being asked was the magnet pathway. Will those Kittredge students still matriculate to Chambly?
If the program stays at Chambly, right? Like, again, we don't know where programs are going to be at this moment. We literally have today just started even conceptualizing what all of this means. So I don't have any specifics on where programs will or will not go. What I can say is that program alignment was a huge recommendation. So not even just for Kittredge in particular, but in general, our program alignment is pretty wonky throughout this district. Some programs start in sixth grade, some start in kindergarten, some start, in seventh, and so like it's just kind of all over the place. So whatever we do, program alignment was one of the big factors that we are definitely going to be looking at.
The previous question about switching from programming to performing, to underperforming schools is a huge concern for many families, especially given how many underperforming schools there are in the county. Why weren't people with this type of expertise included on the committee?
So the committee was open to whoever wanted to be on it. I think asking this committee in particular, and I've done this in another district, we did not have that as a factor in the beginning. The input then came from the internal team, right, as well as community input on where we should or should not shift. I think that's a very subjective space for a community to be in, and I think we need more than just one voice on that. So we understand the community concern on that, and then the question is at least what I've heard from our leaders is, how do you make those schools better? Like, is there an issue with the school? Possibly. Is there some challenges with the school? Is there a way to make that better? Versus saying we should not move people that may, for instance, if there's a school area that doesn't have the density, but the school a mile away has the capacity and the density, do we really not move them because there is a perception that school isn't good, or do we pump as much resources in there to make it better? It's kind of what I at least heard from kind of some district leadership previously. Now, new district leadership, right? That could be a shift.
Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and start. There have been a lot of questions about your previous district, and so I will go ahead and address this in the last 15 minutes. I was not skipping questions. I just wanted to give time.
We are not answering questions about District 65.
Okay. And with that, I will ask this one question now. Can you, or at least can you talk about the integrity of our committees? There was a question here that asked, did you coach parents on certain committees?
Did I coach parents? Our committee, I facilitate committee conversations. I don't coach parents.
Alrighty. Are there any other questions, you guys? I've pretty much read through everything. If I missed your question, no, we will not be adjusting District 65 questions at this time. But if there's anything pertaining to SAP at DeKalb County School District, please go ahead and drop those in the chat and give your feedback using that survey link.
Oh, yep. Let me bring it back up. You put the link in the chat too?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining. And we'll have another one after our next SAP meeting. And look out for our video and some updates on our website.
Recording stopped.
Can you please share who is serving on the committee for the program evaluation? And this is from a SAP member. Sure, we can.
I don't have specific names, and sorry. I mean, if they would like to email us, they can, but we don't have specific names. Right at the moment, I don't have them.
Yes. For transparency purposes, it was for that. But yes, please send us an email. Yes, thank you so much. Alrighty. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please complete the survey if you haven't already.